Hey everybody, sorry I'm running a little bit late getting on here. We were wrapping up a truck out in the shop and I lost track of time. So whatever you want to talk about, just let me know and we can chat about cruisers. You're not going to be on video? Yeah. And I'm just kind of doing paperwork and watching for questions to come in. So yeah, whatever you guys want to chat about, just let me know and I'll try to answer any questions. Thanks. Hey, how's it going, Adam? Good method for removing oil from the engine bay undercarriage. in the past, we always used like Super Clean or like the Gunk degreaser spray, followed up with a power washer. Um, we just like a couple of weeks ago, I was at Home Depot and they had like a foamer attachment that goes on the end of the power washer that like suds up the soap and degreaser. We tried that. We did two front oil pump covers on 80 series last week, I think. And we did one with the degreaser and then one with the foamer attachment. And the foamer attachment seemed to do as good a job or maybe even a little bit better than the degreaser. But the added bonus was it didn't stink afterwards. It didn't smell like burning kerosene when you started the truck up later. So I think that's the method we're going to use going forwards. It's just the foamer attachment for the power washer. And it was cheap. We've got a cheap little Ryobi electric power washer. And I think the foamer attachment was like $30, somewhere around there. So yeah, it seemed to work well. We don't really do any prep. Just don't blast directly into the distributor, the ignition parts. Try not to directly blast anything electrical, and you should be okay. We've never really had any issues, because water sprays up there when you're driving through the rain anyway. So it's fairly waterproof in there. You just don't want to like blast high pressure into any of the electrical stuff. I'm assuming you've got 100 series that's got the pink coolant in it. The old 100 series red coolant, the sealer that went with that was like 12 or 13 bucks a tube. It calls for that new $100-something a tube sealer for the ones that use the pink coolant. My local dealer doesn't even stock it. They use the previous sealer, and they're like, yeah, it gets it through warranty. I'm picky. I use the $110 a tube sealer on the ones that take the pink coolant, and like I keep that stuff wrapped in like 3 Ziploc bags, trying to keep it fresh. And I still don't even get through like half of a tube before it hardens up. And that reminds me, I actually need to order a new tube for a timing belt I've got to do this week, because I ran out on the last one that I did. So thanks for the reminder. Yeah, it sucks to pay the $110 a tube, but that's what they're speccing for it. And the pink coolant just seems to eat through everything. It seems to make the radiators leak faster, the water pump seals leak faster. So, I kind of tend to believe that it probably will eat through the old school sealer. So I stick with the expensive stuff just to be on the safe side. That's probably not what you wanted to hear. But yeah, I don't know of anywhere to get it other than Toyota. And like even with the shop discount, we only get like a couple bucks off of it. So I doubt you'll find it much cheaper on the internet. Wow, 22 or 25 to 40 for the stuff that's in the green tube. Because that's super cheap. I may have to look into that. I'm gonna have to look into that because I don't like paying $100 a tube. And hopefully this is coming through okay on you guys' end. It keeps spinning wheel of death on my end, so I don't know if we're getting ready to have storms come through and it's going to knock out my internet. So hopefully it stays good. Wow, it is like 45 bucks on eBay. Sweet. Now I know where I'm going to have to get it. Hopefully it's fresh and not hardened up tubes. Replacing the cam and crank seals. We we keep them on the estimates when we write them, in case we get in there and we need to replace them. I rarely end up replacing them. Most of the time when we get in there, everything is still dry. Um, and it's kind of one of those, if it's not leaking, I'd hate to go in there and make something start leaking. So if they look dry or they look like they've been recently, like they were done with the last timing belt change, I usually leave them be. Um, the cam ones, uh, on the older 4.7s without VVTI can be kind of tricky to pop out because it's a really big seal. What we usually end up doing is just taking like a drywall screw and we punch it through the face of the seal and grip it in a little bit and then use pliers and pull on it. And you can pop the seals out that way. The VVTI trucks, I'm pretty sure that the camshafts have to come out to do the cam seals, but I've never actually changed them, so I don't know that for sure. The crank seal is pretty easy. Lyle makes, I think they call it a lip seal puller, and it's got like a little thin sheet metal hook that you slip in between the end of the crankshaft and the seal, and it's got a handle you pull on, and it'll pop the crank seal out. And then I just put, a little bit of assembly lube on the inside of the seal and a little bit of the oil, the Toyota sealer on the outside, and just press them back in. The sealer on the outside just helps give you a little bit extra insurance that they won't leak around the outside, and it lubricates it and makes it easier to stick back in. And yeah, do the same on the cam seals when we do change them. And usually you can just kind of work them back in with your thumbs, and you don't have to do anything special to get them back in. We've got an OTC cam and crank seal installer set that's different size drivers that thread together, and then they use like the end of the cam bolt or the end of the crank bolt to draw them in square. We use those more on like the V6s in the Toyota cars, where it's tied up to the frame rail and it's hard to get in there. But the 4.7, usually you can get them in back in, just thumb power. We don't have to do them all that often. I keep them in stock, but we don't end up replacing them that terribly often. Maybe like every 4th or 5th timing belt on average. We do the heater tees every time we drain the coolant, just because those are so failure prone and they're so cheap to replace that anytime we've got the coolant drained, we swap those just as a maintenance item. And I probably should do videos for the cam and crank seals. The one I shot the timing belt video on, it didn't need them. So I didn't feel like pulling perfectly good seals just to make a video. But if I get one in that does need them, I can probably just shoot like a quick add-on like timing belt part 3 video to go with it, and just add that in. Ah, cool. Glad you got it all back together. Yeah, timing belts can be fun. We do a ton of them here, and they're still not fun. There's just way too many places you can go wrong, and it seems like we get like weeks where all we do is timing belts all week. Of course, this week it's all knuckle rebuilds all week. I think we've got four knuckle rebuilds and 1 timing belt to do this week, and a random Prius hybrid battery. I hate doing Subaru timing belts too. The twin cams aren't bad. The 4-cam ones, it takes me like a dozen tries to get those things in time, and I've got all the cam locks and everything for them, and I still don't like doing them. Lubing the slip yokes. So the guy that used to build my drive shafts, his rule was that you never use the Zerk fitting to grease the slip yoke. Like, you grease it when it's apart, like you grease the splines and you put it back together, and that's good. So I went with that theory for years. But it seems like as they're aging, the 80 series and 100 series are getting a lot of slop in the drive shafts. So you don't want to take them apart to grease them each time. So we use the Zerk fitting. We try to not put a lot in, because if you pump them slam full, you run the risk of hydrolocking the drive shaft, and you'll either blow the cap out of the end, and grease comes out there, or you actually hydrolock the shaft and you can end up beating the transfer case bearings to death. And there's a new school of thought that if you keep pumping them until it pumps past the slip shaft seal, then it'll self-relieve. I'm not sure that I'm fully subscribed to that theory. So I just try to moderately grease them and live with it that way, because I don't want to run the risk of hydrolocking the shaft. So we'll give them 2, maybe 3 pumps, and see where it goes from there. Because it's real easy to hydrolock them. And we've had some come in, they'll be complaining of drive shaft noise, and you'll take the little Zerk fitting out to relieve pressure, and the truck will lower down because there's so much hydraulic force in the slip joint. It's actually lifting the truck, which has got to be killing drivetrain components. Yeah, I'm assuming like by the back you mean like in between, kind of where the U-joint caps go. Some drive shafts are solid there, and some of them have like a little pressed in like sheet metal cap. And it sounds like you probably blew the little sheet metal cap loose, if grease is coming out like towards the U-joint end. Yeah, getting that little cap in is terrible. So hopefully it didn't come completely out. It's just leaking around it. Because I've never had real good luck getting it to go back in once it's been blown out. But if you've got enough grease in there that it popped that cap loose, I'd probably take the grease fitting out and see if it'll relieve pressure backwards through there. Maybe like pull the grease fitting out and jump up and down on the bumper some. Just try to get some of the extra grease out of the slip shaft, and that would probably help keep it from hydrolocking. Because yeah, it's a real fine line between enough grease and too much grease. And yeah, we grease a ton of them, and I'm still not good at judging every time where I should stop greasing. Yeah, the grease fixing the thunking. The slip joint splines, they seem to be getting at the age we're seeing a ton of, especially the 80 series, that the splines are just worn out. And when you pump them full of grease, the grease takes up the space in between all the splines and dampens the clunk for a while. But eventually, from the U-joint or from the slip joint sliding and the thunking, you're gonna squish the grease out from between the splines, and it's gonna go back to thunking again. We'll usually try putting some grease in them, to see if it'll cure the thunking. It almost never does. So we usually end up just putting, a new drive shaft in, because a lot of the time, by the time it comes to us and the slip joints are thunking, the U joints are also worn out. So by the time, you figure in the price and labor putting new U joints in and having to deal with a loose slip joint, you're getting really close to just buying a new Toyota drive shaft. And the first one lasted, 25, 30 years. So, we just put another one in and you're good to go, for another 25, 30 years. We actually just put one in the back of an 80 series this afternoon. We don't see a ton of aftermarket fan clutches come through. Most of the time, they've still got the factory fan clutch on them, or usually if it's an aftermarket, we'll see an ASIN, which is a factory one, just in an aftermarket box. We had an 80 series in last week that had a funky aftermarket fan clutch on it. I have no idea what brand it was, but like you couldn't use the factory nuts on it. You had to use these weird smaller nuts because they wouldn't fit. The flange on the factory nuts wouldn't fit, and it was a real pain to put back on. It seemed to spin true. But yeah, it was. I think that's the only aftermarket one that I can remember seeing in recent times. If the fan clutch is on a 100 series, that bearing bracket that the fan clutch bolts to, we're seeing those going bad more and more often now. The bearing is going out in those. And you'll get, some groaning, grumbling noises and a pretty good shake from that. So we always spin them when we're doing the timing belt, which even then is not a great indicator. I did one a couple of years ago. Did a timing belt in prep for a guy, like making this huge cross-country road trip. He got as far as he got to Utah, and the fan pulley went bad. Oh, I do remember which truck is yours now. Yeah, I could see if you had a fan clutch, out of balance, running off center. I could see that prematurely killing that fan bearing, because it doesn't have a lot of leverage, or I mean, the fan's putting quite a bit of leverage on that bearing. So if it were out of balance, I could see it killing it quicker. In which case, I'd probably think about getting, either a Toyota or an ASIN fan clutch. You can probably get an ASIN one off Amazon for fairly cheap. That might be worth doing rather than having to pull that whole fan bracket again. Yeah, I'd probably just swap it out just for safety, because you're almost to a timing belt by the time you get that fan bracket back out again. Oh, yeah, thanks for tuning in, Alex. Yeah, hopefully it should record this and replay it if you missed the cam crank seal question. I'll try to get it re-uploaded this evening, so it'll be available. And how much coolant do you need to remove to get the top hose off? I can't imagine much more than a gallon. When you pull the heater tees, you don't lose a ton. Like usually, we don't even drain the coolant before we do the heater tees. We just mop up whatever we spilled when we pull them loose. So I can't imagine that the top hose would spill much more. You know, of course, now I'm going to be wrong, and you're going to end up with like 3 gallons of coolant on your garage floor. But yeah, I would guess maybe a gallon. Technically, when you put the paper gaskets back in the T case, you can do them dry. I picked up a tip, George out of Valley Hybrids in California that does a bunch of T case work. He uses anaerobic gasket sealer on all of the paper gaskets. And so I started doing that when we do, you know, transfer cases and transmissions. And it's not as thick as the RTV. It just kind of makes a thin glue layer and glues all the gaskets in and just keeps them from, keeps them from being able to weep. So we just use it's Loctite anaerobic. I think it's anaerobic flange seal or anaerobic gasket maker, something like that. On like the 80 series transfer cases, we use the Toyota Orange form in place gasket maker with no paper gaskets because those just get glued together with the orange stuff. But when we are using paper gaskets, I put some of the anaerobic on it. Just a sec, I can go grab some and get part number. Yeah, we use, it's Permatex gasket maker, and it's part number 51813, and we just get it in these little blue tubes. George uses enough that he gets it in like caulk gun tubes, but you know, you can get this stuff at the parts store, and it seems to really help. Of course, you're never going to get the gaskets back off whole again. They shred when you try to take them back apart. But it does work good at keeping them from weeping. If you've got new paper gaskets on there already and they're weeping, you probably want to put new paper gaskets on if you're going to use the sealer, just because there's already gear oil soaked into the gaskets. On the bolts, you can use this red stuff. I'm trying to think. There's some of them that go through, some are blind holes and some of them are through holes. And I just have to look at them each time. But the through hole ones, I put a little bit of sealer on when I put them back together. On the input and output shafts, I put RTV. I just take my finger and run it around the inside splines. And then I put it on the inside of the flange, put the flange on, and then I wipe everything clean, and I use red Loctite on the nut itself. But if you've got RTV everywhere, then the Loctite won't actually stick. So you got to clean the RTV off the threads before you put the red Loctite on, if that makes sense. Hi to Russia. That is crazy. Somebody is tuning in from Russia. Like people from all over the world. I've done one, maybe two of the yellow boxes. I haven't done them on 100 series. I did it on an 80 series. And it was the previous generation to what they have now, and you actually spliced it in behind the glove box at the ECU itself. So it was easy. I just stuck it in the kick panel and just ran the wires up to the glove box. I haven't done one on 100 series. I went through the trouble of getting set up as a yellow box dealer, and then I haven't ever actually ordered any. And yeah, we don't get much call for them. Yeah, I think the old yellow box version was similar to the Mark's 4x4 one. And is that 17 degrees Celsius or 17 Fahrenheit? 17 Celsius doesn't sound bad. Or yeah. Yeah, the newest version of the yellow box is plug and play. I haven't done one of those yet. I'll have to look up and see if I'm even still hooked up with them, because it's been, I think it's before I actually moved into this shop that I set everything up. So it has to be going on close to 3 years ago, and I haven't ordered anything since. So I'm probably not even still in their database. I can check. It only worked out well if I was ordering several at a time because of the shipping from Australia. Doing them onesies, twosies, it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Like I would have to sell them for more than Yellow Box did to make it work. But I can look into it. Shoot me an email at otram and remind me. I am so far behind on doing paperwork and scheduling. I'm gonna have to come in. That's probably what I'm gonna end up doing all day tomorrow. I'm way far behind on world politics. I follow Central and South America, but as far as Europe and Asia, yeah, I don't follow it much. I probably should, but yeah. So yeah, I don't have much of an opinion. It's best to use a torque wrench. Um, I'll run them down with an impact to get them close. But I do the final with a torque wrench. That's a big enough nut and a big enough shaft that it's probably not super critical, but I like to be sure. And Toyota put out the torque specs for a reason. So, unless I'm out in the woods trying to get something just back together enough to drive home, I usually use a torque wrench. 160 sounds about right. I'd have to look it up to be sure. We go through so many different iterations of trucks that it's hard for me to keep everything straight in my head. But that sounds in the ballpark. If you're losing it between the trans and the transfer case, the seal you're after is actually in the front of the transfer case. There's not one in the back of the trans. It uses the transfer case seal to do double duty. So yeah, when you pop the transfer case completely off, yeah, the seal's right there. So it's just the one. Like the 80s series has, they've got two, like one in the back of the trans and one in the back or in the front of the transfer case. But the older stuff is just a single seal. Um, it depends on the condition of the drive, or not the drive shaft, the output shaft splines on the transmission, because the output splines come like 8 inches to a foot out of the back of the transmission, and the whole transfer case like slides onto that with a stack of gears, and those splines will twist slightly, so the gear will get stuck when you're trying to pull the case off. And it's like a weird puzzle trying to get the right angle to get the transfer case to clear that frame cross member that's behind it when you're pulling it backwards. If the splines aren't twisted, it's not terrible to do. I think it's 3 bolts on the back of the case and 2 inside. And then it'll pull off, and then 1 big nut under the cone cover on the back. Yeah, if we get one through, I could do a video on it. We don't get a ton of 40s through here. I mean, I guess I've got 4 here right now. We don't get many in for like T-case work. I had one, I just did a trans and T-case rebuild for a 40, but the guy brought them to me loose. So I just had them sitting on the bench when I did them. And I actually ended up making a transfer case puller because this one had super twisted splines and it just was not coming off easy. So I machined up a quick puller to pop the transfer case off. But yeah, I thought about doing a video on the trans and T-case rebuild on that. I just didn't get around to it. We had so much going on, I just didn't have time to set everything up. I have no idea on the home link. I don't even know. I don't even know what that is. Yeah, it depends on when they introduced it. If some of the 98s had home link, it's likely pre-wired for it because they seem to do like one harness for everything. If it's something that didn't come out until later generations, then it might not be in there. Garage opener. Yeah, I don't know. It just depends on when they released it. And wet left front wheel locks up when I hit the brakes. What year was your Cruiser? Because if it's drum brake front, the drums are probably out of adjustment. If it's disc brake and it's locking up when you hit the brakes, and it's only the left front, you've probably got a sticky caliper. Okay, so it's disc brake. So disc brake. I would guess sticky caliper. but that's just a guess without actually seeing it. Yeah, I've never seen the home link. I've never paid that much attention. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think what else could make a left brake lock up. Yeah, that's all I can really think of is a sticky caliper. Um, if you like cruise it around for a while, like drive, hit the brakes, and then get out and like, kind of feel the wheels and see if one of them is hotter than the others. ABV. Um, I'm bad at acronyms. What is the ABV? I'm assuming that's like the proportioning valve. Um, oh, anti-backfire valve. I don't know. I've never I've never had to check one. I've never had reason to look at one. Um, I don't even know that I could tell you where it is. And I don't have. I've got all the old Toyota factory manuals, but I'm missing the emissions manual. So I've only got the carburetor overview. Um, Backfires on D-cell. Um, I don't know. Off the top of my head, without driving it and hearing it, um, because I've seen them backfire both from being rich and from being lean. Um, I would guess you've got something clogging one of the internal ports in the carb, uh, and it's still letting fuel flow uh, even when you're decelerating. But it's hard to say without actually looking at it and hearing it. Most of them we see that backfire when you're decelerating. Most of them I've seen have been running lean. Like for some reason the idle solenoid or the idle circuit's clogged, and somebody's like upped the idle speed and upped the fuel mixture on the mains to compensate for it, to mask the fact that it doesn't actually have an idle circuit. And then we end up going through and cleaning the carb out and putting it all back together and then retuning everything now that it has a working idle circuit. But yeah, I can rebuild and tune carbs, but as far as troubleshooting them, I'm not super great at doing it by symptom. I've got a wideband air fuel meter that we use, and I'll just hook it up and I'll, cruise the truck around while graphing the air fuel ratio. and I'll narrow it down that way. Since I learned on fuel injection first, it's easier for me to think in terms of air-fuel ratios and work back to symptoms from there than it is from working on the working carb side forwards. So yeah, it's a roundabout way of doing it. But yeah, that's just the way I learned. I can usually get them tuned in pretty good. But sometimes if it's an oddball symptom, it takes me a while to figure it out. Eh, the emissions aren't terrible to deal with. You know, as long as everything's there, it's not horrible to keep it all running. I hate it when they come through and somebody's ripped out half of the emissions stuff. Trying to get what's left to play nice is always fun. And we don't have emissions out here in Fauquier County. So yeah, I'm lucky that way. And if you guys don't mind, I think I'm going to jump off of here a couple minutes early. My wife just texted me and she's on her way home. So, yeah, I'm going to jump off here and I will try to catch y'all again next Tuesday. But trainee transfer case. It's it's 50-50 on whether it's easier to pull the trainee and the transfer case, or trainee or just the transfer case. The the trainee is heavy and awkward to get back in. Dropping it out is not terrible. Putting it back in can be fun. Like we usually take the floor hump off and go in through one of the doors with an engine hoist and straps. If it's just the seal between the two and the gasket that's between the two weeping, I would be inclined to just pull the transfer case rather than try to pull both. The transfer case on its own is more manageable to get back in and out. It's still not fun, but it's more manageable than doing them as a set. If you had leaking transmission issues or you wanted to go through and do bearings, then I'd pull them both. But yeah, if you're going to pull the pair, I'd pull the hump. It seems like a lot of work pulling the seats and pulling the hump, but in the end, it's a whole lot easier, to get in there to get access to shimmy and move everything around. If you're going to go that far in, I think seriously about doing the clutch, the pressure plate, throwout bearing, rear main seal. If you're going through the trouble of pulling the transmission, you might as well hit all the wear items while you're in there. But yeah, but cool. Well, I'm going to jump off of here, and I will catch you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.